Today's guest is the Colombian mathematician Tatiana Toro. Professor Toro is based at the University of Washington, but also recently took on the role of director at the Mathematical Sciences Research Institute in Berkeley, California. In fact, it's all changed because MSRI has been renamed the Simons Laufer Mathematical Sciences Institute, or SL Math for short. So there's a new name to remember. Now, a lot of Numberphile videos are filmed at the Institute with visiting mathematicians. So, of course, I'm really curious to hear about Professor Toro's plans there. But also, I wanted to hear more about her personal journey. And that's where our episode starts today.
I was born in Bogota, Colombia, and that's 2,600 meters above sea level.
High above sea level. Okay.
2,640.
2,640
meters above sea level.
Does that make life different in any way? Or because you're used to it, it's normal?
Because you're used to it, it's normal. But for example, your lungs are bigger when you grow up at such altitude.
So now that you're closer to sea level here, does that mean you're like superhuman and you're fitter than most?
No, I've gotten older. And I've lived too long at sea level. But before, initially, yes, it made a difference.
Okay. What was your childhood like? What were you like as a little girl?
My opinion was that I was a well-behaved little girl. My teacher's opinion seemed to differ. I was in a family of, as the oldest child. I have a sibling who's 4 years younger. My parents were both of them first generation to college. They were both physicians. My father had done his PhD, after his MD, his PhD in Czechoslovakia between 1958 and 1962. And when he went back to Colombia, he was labeled as a communist, and therefore he was not offered a paying position. Actually, he was not allowed to work for many years. My parents got married soon after that, and they lived in the salary as resident in medicine, which was not very high, and that's where I was born.
So your father got a bit of a hard time just by coincidence that he went to Czechoslovakia?
Yeah, that's where he got a fellowship to go there, and that's where he went.
Did he know he was taking a risk? Did he know when he came back he might get a hard time?
I don't think he understood for how long he will be a hard time. The label stayed for years after, until I was maybe a teenager. So I don't think he could have guessed. But in his mind, he had a promise that he was going to come back to Colombia, that he had compromised with his country, and he came back.
So coming back to you, what were you like as a little girl? You obviously had parents who were educated, and that were you, would I have guessed you were going to become a mathematician if I met you as a little girl?
In Colombia, becoming a mathematician was not something that people would think about. I don't think it was an option as a livelihood. My parents wanted me to have a good education. Most of the schools for girls at the time were girls' schools, and most of them were religious, and so that was not an option for me. And there were very few co-ed schools, and one of them was the French school. So the French government has schools in developing world to guarantee that the kids of diplomats are at the level when they go back to France for study. And so this school offers schooling at very reasonable price for Colombian kids. And so that's what I wanted, a co-ed school, French school. And because of the French system, very original. In first grade, I learned set theory, and I learned how with manipulatives in the playground, and I learned how to count in different bases. And I really loved it. And so to learn how to count in bases, we had a building that was made out of wood, a construction. And then we also had little boxes, and we had beans. And so that's how we counted, and we went from one basis to the other. And I loved it. So if you had seen me playing in math class and actually teaching my classmates how to do math, I think you could have guessed that at least that was clearly what I enjoyed. And when you saw me in other classes, you might have noticed the difference.
So it sounds like it was very unusual that you went to a co-ed school and it was a French school, that you were quite unusual amongst your friends, I guess. Then.
Well, I made my friends there. Actually, I made my friend, my best friend to today, somebody who I met in I don't remember if it was preschool or first, I think it was in preschool. And what brought us together is, so we had a uniform. The French school had a uniform. It was a wool gray skirt, a blue sweater, and the wool skirts were expensive and you are growing. And so our mothers had figured out the way to make the skirt last. So you had suspenders. And so we wore suspenders. Initially, the skirts were a little bit big and then, but we didn't like to show that we had suspenders. And so we became friends because we were the two girls in the school, in the class with suspenders. And it was very good. I mean, we're still best friends now.
You bonded over wearing suspenders to keep your skirts up.
You might think that that's a detail, but that's
And you're still friends today?
Yes.
Amazing. Is that friend still in Colombia or is she over here? Or?
Oh, she's in Colombia. She lived some time in Canada for about 8 years, and then she went back to Colombia. And I'll see her next week.
So you had this passion for mathematics early. Were you quite well-rounded? Were you into other subjects as well? And I know you told me yesterday that you liked football and things like that. Were you quite a well-rounded child, or were you very math-focused?
I think initially, in elementary school, yes, I like other things. And I have always liked history. History was the other thing that I paid attention to. But in the French system, we got tracked very early. So roughly at the equivalent of 9th grade, I was tracked into the math track. And yes, I had to do literature, philosophy, but most of the time I did math, physics, some chemistry, and a little bit of biology. So it was very science-oriented, and it was mostly math-oriented. At the end of high school, I think half of the hours of the week were math class.
Your parents were very encouraging of this, I assume, because they were quite educated, or did they want you to do something more practical?
No, I think my father would have liked me to be a doctor because he was a doctor. I mean, I was a good student. So I actually think that in high school, they didn't pay too much attention to what I was doing. My mother, I think she ended up being a doctor, a physician, but I think in some ways, she would have liked to be an engineer. So she liked the fact that I did math. I recall very well. So they both had told me they like math, and we're having a conversation maybe when I was in 9th, 10th grade. And my parents asked a math question, and then they told me, actually, I don't remember how to do that. It was a basic question. And my thought was, they used to love math and they don't remember how to do that. That's so sad to forget the math you have learned. I hope that never happens to me.
Okay.
It's funny. I remember that I think that was maybe the time without noticing that I said I was going to become a mathematician.
I don't ever want to forget the stuff that I love.
Yep.
I read that you participated in the Math Olympiad for Colombia. What was that experience like?
Not like anybody else who you interview will tell you. So this was 1981. It was first time that the Math Olympiad was going to take place in the United States, and the United States decided that they were going to have a big event. And as such, they decided to invite a number of countries that had never been invited. And so Colombia was invited, and they invited Colombia to bring a team of 8 kids. And it was relatively last minute. Colombia didn't have the infrastructure to do anything. So what they did is a group of mathematicians took over preparing the kids. And so they invited a number of schools from just Bogota. At the first Olympiad, it was just Bogota, to send 4 students per school. And I ran into the boys who had been selected by the school to go to this exam. And I asked them, it was a coincidence. They're coming down, I'm coming up the stairs. Where are you going? It says, we're going to the Math Olympiad. And I said, what's that? And they said, well, there's this thing that's an Olympiad, and you go and take tests to see if you make it to the team to go to the States. I said, I want to do that. I said, well, the school chose that, go talk to the math teacher. And I went to talk to the math teacher, and he told me, look, they asked for 4 kids. We chose the boys of 12th grades because we thought they had a better chance. If there's room in the card, you can go, but you have to explain when you arrive that you are not coming as part of the school. The school is not endorsing you. We're not sponsoring you as the other guys. And so I found room in the cart. I went. I explained my situation. I'm here independently. The school's not sponsoring me. They're the ones sponsored by the school, not me. Can I stay? They say I could stay. I managed to classify, and I was number 5 in the team. The team comes order, and the reason it comes order is because at least at the time, all the people who were number 1s took the test together at the Olympiad. So I was number 5.
Yep.
Once I made it, the school decided to sponsor me. They were very proud that they had sent me to do this. I came to the US. We were somewhere around 186 kids. Of those, there were maybe 6 to 8 girls. Some of them came from the Soviet Union, so those teams were quite guarded. I met a number of kids from the French. So I spoke French. I went to French school. From the French team and French Canadians. And I found out what they were doing at schooling. And I thought, oh, that's exactly what I'm going to do. In terms of the Olympiad, I did horribly.
Right.
I have never been a fast thinker. And that was required. I was very nervous. But this opened all my horizons. I mean, I found out there a path. In Colombia, I didn't see a path. I thought I actually was going to be a petroleum engineer because that was the closest thing I could imagine to do math and to have a degree of freedom that I wanted.
So the exposure to the children from other education systems was very inspiring for you.
Yeah, I mean, they told me, they basically taught me what the path after what I was doing in school could be. And I decided then and there that's what I was going to do. I went back. I took the exams from the French system. I took the baccalaureate. I got the mention that I needed. I applied to schools in France. I was accepted. And I went. And
so you did your schooling in France then?
No, that will have been too easy. No, I went there for a year. So I'm going to try to describe the picture. So first of all, this is many years ago.
Yep.
Many, many years ago, Colombia was a very closed society, especially the state where my father came from. Women never moved out of their parents' house before they were ready to get married. So having an 18-year-old pack her bags and move to Paris was not well seen. This was not something that a respectable father would have allowed her daughter to do. But I was old enough to not need I was able to do it. It was very hard. I did not know what jet lag was. I didn't understand that there was a time difference in the world. And at the time, telephone communications were very expensive. In the back of all of these, there's the fact that at the time, my family did not have many financial resources. So we were able to speak on the phone twice a week for 10 minutes each time. And then, given that I came from a very tight-knit family, I was very homesick. The French environment, I ended getting French at the time, liked to rank everything. I ended up being in the best school in what was supposed to be the best class with the kids who had done the best in these exams that I had taken. And this was not a friendly group of kids.
Right.
It was very competitive. There were 55 of us when we started.
In Paris, this is?
In Paris, in the class, at Louis-le-Grand, in HXM. And then of those 55, there were 8 girls. By the end of the year, there were only 5. And I did not return. So it was a harsh year.
Do you look at it as a positive experience in your life or a negative?
Oh, it was a very positive experience in my life. For 2 reasons. I mean, I learned a lot about myself. My performance in class went from fantastic to horrendous. And
because the material had become harder or because of the other pressures weighing down on you?
Because of the other pressures. Because the material was hard. Taught à la Bourbaki. Yes, but I love math. So that wasn't the issue. And what was interesting is that in the exam that we took right before we went on vacation, in Christmas, when I was going to see my aunt and I had the family to look forward to, I did fantastic. And the more depressed I was, the worse my grades were. So it taught me that balance in life is important in order to succeed professionally, for example. Not only that, but it also taught me that maybe I wasn't ready And financially, I was putting a humongous strain on the family. So that was part of why I went back. That emotionally, physically, I was not ready, but that I needed to do everything possible to be ready to leave the next time. I remember landing in Bogota after a year in Paris and thinking, I'm here to stay for a while, but I'm leaving again.
It sounds like, from meeting those boys on the staircase and talking about the Olympiad to going to Paris so early, despite the stigma, that you had a lot of initiative. You knew what you wanted and you were pushy. You would push for what you wanted.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I think I owe that to my parents, that despite being, they treated me, first of all, in my household, my parents always taught us that education was the key to success because it had been for them. And my grandfather on my father's side was a farm worker. My father was one out of 10 siblings. He was the only one to go to college and ended up becoming an MD, PhD. And years later in Colombia, he really was recognized as the only neuropathologist, and he started a branch called tropical neuropathology. And my mother was a pathologist also, who was very successful in her branch of pathology. So education was the key to success. I learned from my mother's side, in particular from my maternal grandmother, who was an indigenous woman who never spoke about her life before meeting my grandfather. I think it was a difficult one. I learned determination. I learned the fact that my grandmother, from where she stood, she fought for my mother and my aunts to be able to attend college. And so she showed determination. So did my mother and my aunts. And so I'm a product of my family. Can I take you back a tiny bit?
Of course.
So what happened between coming back to Colombia and starting schooling there? So Colombia is a country with lots of history. Things happen in between from the historical perspective that affected my schooling. So I went back. I'm going to reveal my age, but okay, so be it. I went back in June of 1983. I decided to start at the National University because the year had been hard. I actually took the exam to go into medicine. I did to the National University. I got in. I was number one at the exam, and suddenly I had a fear. I did not want to be a physician. So I petitioned that I be allowed to there was no mathematics that semester starting. You could not be a freshman that semester. I petitioned to start physics, which was the closest thing. It was an incredibly lucky coincidence because as a freshman in physics, you needed to do a lab. So I started in physics and I did a lab. Because the National University had suffered some closures due to political situation, we were not on time. I mean, we started somewhere mid-October, beginning of November. I finished the class, and then when the second semester started, a little bit after, May 16, 1984, there was a very large demonstration at the National University in Bogota. The reason was some students from the National University in Cali had been killed the day before by the army. And this demonstration ended up in a fight where many students were disappeared. And I mean exactly what I said. There's some students died. The university was closed. Barbed wire was placed around the university, and the university was closed for a year. And so I was not able to study. I was not able to attend classes. Initially, the university was basically shut. The buildings were closed. The lights were off. After some time, after a few months from May, they allow faculty back into the building to gather their staff. And so I petitioned that I be allowed to teach myself the classes I was missing, or to continue the classes I was doing, take exams, and if I pass the exam, they will count as if I had taken the class. So basically, by the time the university reopened, which was in 1985, a year and a couple of months afterwards, I had basically finished all the math curriculum.
Self-taught, or were you in communication with lecturers?
No, self-taught.
Just from books?
Yeah. Sometimes I was able to go and ask questions, but not very often. So basically, when the semester restarted, I had finished that class. So by the time things started, I had been registered really for only 3 semesters at the university. But to graduate, you needed to have been registered for 4. I was missing a history class. So humanities class, I took history. And so my last semester, I only did a history class. And I graduated after 4 semesters of being at the university, which is the minimum to allow to graduate from the university.
It sounds like you're a prodigy. Like, it's amazing doing it super quick, self-taught.
I am determined. And I had, and the French system had taught me a number of things.
Okay. Were you part of those protests, by the way, or was that sort of separate from you?
No, I think one of the things that has kept me alive in Colombia is I have very good survival skills. So here's what happened. That morning I arrived to university and there were pictures of bodies on the ground, and there were all the ways where there were flags everywhere, and there was a call to a demonstration. The environment was very tense. I mean, you felt the army was already in the neighborhood. I went to class and I thought, I'm getting out of here. This is going to be ugly. My best friend from college said, why don't you stay? I want to stay. I want to see. And she stayed, and fortunately she came out alive. But what happened that day and the things she saw marked her life in many ways. So no, I left.
A crucial decision in your life, perhaps.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So now you've graduated. This is positive news. What do you do now? You've graduated in mathematics?
Yes, with a BS in math.
Yeah.
I wanted to go do a PhD in mathematics because that was a way to learn more mathematics. I had some teachers who had done PhDs, both in the US and in Germany, and they said, yes, you should go. I applied to a number of schools. The number was limited by how much money I had to apply to schools. And I applied to some things that somebody knew somebody and thought they would get. And I applied to a couple of more that for one reason or another I wanted. And I got into Stanford.
That's not trivial. That's like top of the tree almost, isn't it?
Yeah, it was a very good school. Yeah. I had no idea, actually. I applied to Stanford because I had heard it was close to Berkeley. The truth, I didn't exactly know where Stanford or Berkeley were at the time. And because it had a good medical school, which of course doesn't relate at all to mathematics, but from where I stood, that must be a good school. If you have a good medical school, you must be good at everything. Yeah, right. I remembered I look at life from my parents. They were doctors.
Yeah.
I got into Berkeley and into Stanford, but Berkeley did not send the financial information at the same time. And it was clear that I needed I needed tuition and support. And Stanford did. And so I accepted Stanford right before I got the information from Berkeley. And at the time, it was very lucky. Stanford was a smaller class. They took good care of the graduate students and things went well.
So you've had this unusual undergraduate experience where you're sort of self-taught. You've done it very quickly. You've done it in another country. And now you're at Stanford, one of the great universities of the world. Were you prepared once you were dropped in the deep end to do a PhD at this prestigious university? What was it like, that transition?
I think that what I knew mathematically was enough to learn what came next. But in particular, I believe in life is not only what you know, but your attitude toward learning what you don't know. The experience in France, the fact that I had to teach myself the undergraduate curriculum in Colombia gave me a sense that I could do it. And also, I recall what my brother told me as I'm leaving Colombia to go to the US. He said, the last time you left, it didn't work. But remember clearly, you do not fit here. You need to make this one work. And so it was true. I had a big motivation. So yes, in grad school, you have to work very hard. And I did, but I never stopped to think, am I prepared? Well, they were offering what I had to learn. So I sat down and learned it.
I imagine in terms of how you were treated as a Colombian at Stanford, I imagine at these universities, so many people come from so many places that you sort of were able to fit in.
The PhD program was very international. There were kids from lots of different places. What was surprising is that I had imagined there were not going to be that many women because there's not that many. But my incoming class at Stanford was a little larger than usual. It was 17 because there were 5 kids who were coming with somebody who was just moving there, Rick Shane. So, but I was the only woman of the class,
right,
in my year. And at the time, there were very few women in the PhD program at Stanford. On the other hand, that meant we were very supportive of each other. So I somehow had this group of women that welcomed me. And then the first years, we all were exactly in the same boat at Stanford. All the first years did exactly the same thing at the time. So we studied together. Many of us were foreigners from faraway countries. So we work together.
A lot of people I've spoken to for these podcasts, when I talk to them about their undergraduate experience, as they come towards the end, they start developing their own specializations, passions. They might be influenced by certain lecturers to think this is where I want to go. Because you were so self-taught during your undergraduate, were you able to do that? Did you finish your undergraduate with the particular niches you wanted to move into in the mathematical world?
I thought so. And it was because there was one book that I had read there were 2 books that were more advanced than the others. And I thought I was going to go that direction. And then I took a class on that, the fall quarter at Stanford of my first year. And very soon after I realized, oh no, that's not it. And so I went with a very open mind to the classes that I took. And in the complex analysis class, I liked what we were learning, and I liked the style of the faculty member. And so the class was taught by Leon Simon, and he became my advisor. And my TA was Dan Pollack, who became my husband. So, after one, of course, it took some time, but
complex analysis was good to you.
It was an excellent class, yes.
And so, I won't go into the details of the mathematics, partly because this is a podcast and partly because I wouldn't possibly understand. But just for people listening, what became your specialization? Just complex analysis, anything else? Or?
No, actually, it was not complex analysis. What became my specialization is called geometric measure theory. And I'm going to give you an example. This is not going to sound like mathematics for a second, but just bear with me. I'm actually going to give you 2 examples. First, imagine, take a wire. You take a wire, you bend it however you want. You make a soapy solution, and you put it. And you come out, and there is a soap film attached to your wire. And so geometric measure theory is the field in mathematics that gives theoretical explanation of what the soap film is that helps you predict how smooth it is. If I'm sure you have a picture of a soap film in your head where you see very smooth pieces that come and intersect other pieces in specific ways. So geometric measure theory tells you that these things exist and helps you study the way they intersect.
Okay.
The other thing that I did later, but is also geometric measure theory. Imagine you are driving and it's snowing. And so there's snowflakes are falling on your windshield and you see very well the very raggedy edge of the snowflake. And that snowflake has some properties from the mathematical point of view. Although you might think, why would somebody wonder about this? You wonder if you can make a snowball whose surface has the same raggedy properties, because when you think of a snowball, it tends to be rather smooth. But no, the snowflake on your windshield is very raggedy. So that's something we answer with a collaborator years, after my PhD. But
do you deal with such beautiful looking objects, or do you turn it all into formulas and mathematics if I look at one of your papers?
Formulas are beautiful. So
of course they are. Of course they are. But they take special eyes to see the beauty.
Correct.
Yeah.
No, I have never drawn the beautiful pictures. Some of them are difficult, but they're always in my mind.
Okay. So you finish your PhD.
Mm-hmm.
presumably. and what happens next? Because I know this can become one of the things of academia in general, the postdoc trap, and trying to find where to go next. What do you do next?
So let me again, clearly it's not that only like history, but history has had a context. So let me give you the context under which I graduated. Right before I graduated, within a couple of years of graduation, two things had happened. There was Tiananmen Square and the Berlin Wall fell. And let me explain what that meant from, at least in the very my local environment, from the job point of view. So after Tiananmen Square, Chinese students who until then had come mostly to the US on a J1 visa and had to go back to China afterwards. I don't know exactly. So actually, a parenthesis here, I'm not exactly sure. They all came in a J1 visa, but they had to go back to China before they were able to apply for the job.
Right.
The government of the United States said, well, it's unsafe, you can stay. So suddenly there were a larger number of Chinese students applying for jobs. And in the area I study is related to Chern's work. Chern, big, one of the founding fathers of MSRI.
So you're looking for a job in an area that is popular with Chinese students and graduates?
Some of them, not. And moreover, the wall had fallen. And so suddenly many mathematicians who were already established mathematicians in the Soviet Union were applying to come to the US, and they were willing to take beginning jobs. And so
really competitive job market all of a sudden.
And because the wall had fallen, some sources of funding for mathematics, for example, DoD, the Department of Defense, they were withdrawing their support because there was no need anymore. And so it was a very, very competitive job market. Many of the people who graduated from Stanford with me, and that people started getting one job 1 year at a time, they ended up leaving. And I had what's called an additional perk. It's called a TwoBody Problem. So my partner at the time, my husband later on, was also a mathematician and who graduated a year prior to me. So our goal was to get the best possible postdocs we could and then try to figure out a way to get jobs in the same place.
I've never heard that term for that two-body problem, because so many mathematicians are married. You've got to find a job together somehow.
It's interesting. That is a very common term for people in this situation.
Yeah.
And so I had a very nice result for my thesis, something that caught many people by surprise. And so I was very lucky. I have a number of options. And so I was able to choose what I wanted to do. I spent my first year after PhD at the Institute for Advanced Study. And then I had a 2-year postdoc here at the University of California in Berkeley.
You're ticking off all the great places to work, aren't you?
And I was lucky. I mean, luck counts for a lot in life. Then we came here. I came for the year in Berkeley. It was very lucky. My husband, there was a program at MSRI that year in his field. So he was here at MSRI. After that, we decided to apply for jobs together because it was clear that the job market was going to be difficult. The people advising us said, look, you can do a few applications now. We both had an extra year. You can do a few applications now and see what happens. We actually got a couple of jobs and ended up made an arrangement with 2 universities. We went to the University of Chicago for 2 years because I was very interested in working with somebody there, Carlos Koenig. And then those positions were not likely to become tenured, and it was a difficult market. We also talked to the University of Washington. They offered us 2 positions, and they were willing to wait 2 years for us to show up. And so we took the 2 years at the University of Chicago, and then we moved to the University of Washington, where I have been since.
Ever since. Lots of people listening will know what MSRI is, and now the name change, SL Math.
Mm-hmm.
How do you describe what it is? Like if you met someone at a party who wasn't a mathematician and they asked, "Oh, I hear you're the director at this building up on the hill there." How do you describe what the institute is to them?
So I start by saying that it's a math institute with a broad portfolio. So where we bring researchers at the top of their field to investigate the most pressing questions in their area that we have an advisory committee that helps us select the programs and pair them because we want to create new ideas. And that we bring the people together, we offer them a good collaborative space, cross the fingers, and hope for the best.
Throw all the ingredients in the pot and see what comes out.
And make sure that the conditions are optimal and then let the magic happen. Okay. But I also emphasize that that's not the only thing that we do, that we have a number of, that we cared about making sure that the mathematical sciences are healthy, not only now, for at the future. And so developing talent from very early stages to later on is something we pay lots of attention. So we have a number of programs of the public understanding of mathematics, and we have programs that have been born. One important thing that I emphasize is that we listen to the mathematical community. And so many of the programs we have, for example, MSRI app, the Summer Research in Mathematics, and Adjoint, and I will be able to, we'll see where we go with each of them. These were born in response to communities' request, conversation, and they are some of our greatest programs because the community tell us, look, if you want to guarantee the good health of mathematics in the years to come, you need to make sure that you bring young kids from all ways of life with a variety of experiences. And so we respond to that.
Is it too early to ask you if you have any ambition or desire or things you particularly want to do, any way you want to leave your mark during your tenure as director, something you want to accomplish that hasn't been accomplished here yet?
Let me try to answer that question. So we very often talk in this country about the pipeline, the leaky pipeline, who continues to do mathematics and go into the mathematical sciences. And one of the things I see in, as you think more and more about the issues, you see more clearly. But one of the impressions I've always had is we say, oh, the pipeline is leaky at this point or at this point, and people run a program here, but then they don't have control of what happens at the two ends of the piece of the pipe that they're looking. And one of the things that's unique about SL Math is that we can, at this point, we have built a number of pieces of the pipeline. So we have our mathical books that we distribute to Title I schools in different areas of the U.S. We are creating guidebooks for the teachers to be able to use these and develop a love of mathematics in kids. So these spans preschool to grade 12. We have some programs aimed at older undergrads, some at graduate students, and then further. And so what I see, one of the things I would like to do is to build the pieces of the pipeline that we are missing, right, to at least guarantee that we can make a small contribution to that pipeline, but by taking care of people from the beginning to the point where they can come out successfully at the other end.
Has it gotten to a point yet where you're starting to see some of the leaks? Or I know you've only sort of just taken over, but you've been around for a while now having a look.
Oh, we see the leaks, and one of my big concerns, something that I was concerned even before I got here, and I was involved with MSRI through the Scientific Advisory Committee and the Committee on Women before. So a source of leak that we're paying attention a lot at this moment, which is very temporal, but is what was the effect of COVID on the young people. In particular, we are looking at the statistics of, are the women leaving the professions? Are the young women leaving the profession?
Because of COVID?
Well, we don't know if it's because of COVID, but for example, we were talking to the AWM because we noticed decrease in applications to some by women. And we actually talked to the AWM to see if they had noticed this decrease, and they had. And right. So one of the questions we're asking right now is, was it last year only because we were just coming out of COVID and there was lots of uncertainty about what the summer of 2022 or the year was going to look like, and that's why people didn't apply? Or is it because these women who were in academia decided to maybe look for a different option? And so we don't know.
I imagine for many years, increasing participation of women in mathematics has been a battle, and it's been slowly increasing. It's been a dip now, has there?
Yes.
Right.
But we don't know. Sometimes you have a year that is a fluke, and then it might be that next year we have an increase and people are really eager to do it or not. So, and, there are other leaks, and, the leaky pipeline is a overly used word or expression.
Right.
And we all have an image of what it is. But that's a very concrete example of something that we're trying to understand. What's happening. And it happened not only to women, actually to the young people. One of the things we look at is that at least the anecdotal evidence indicates that a number of people stepped out of academia.
When I think of the Institute, I so often think of the premier best mathematicians working on the best problems. Like, this is like the Super Bowl. But you also are thinking of the Institute very much in its role of bringing through all mathematicians from kids and high school, university into the field as well.
You did the analogy of the Super Bowl. When you see a kindergartner running in the playground, you have no idea if that kindergartner is going to be Tom Brady or not.
Yeah.
So not everybody has the chance to run and throw the ball, you'll never know who was going to be your star.
How much do you think your experiences as a youngster, coming here for that Math Olympiad and getting that exposure that was such a game changer for you, informs you now? Do you often think back to yourself as a youngster when you're thinking about the programs and things you're involved with now?
Not necessarily of the Math Olympiad. What I think a lot about is, and it's not just at the Institute, but in all ways of life, is that I have had a path that can be seen as a slightly unusual. And I was given chances at the right times. And I think, by a number of metrics, I could be considered a success. So I believe that there are many paths that lead to success, and that each individual writes that path. And that path is not necessarily a straight path. I have taken some detours. Life happens, but there are many paths to success. And so when I look at the Institute, that's what I want to focus on the fact that there are many, many ways, many paths to succeed.
You're an administrator now. I see you sitting here talking about things like, is the Wi-Fi working? Is the electricity going to work? You're a manager of people now, but you're also a mathematician. You've written papers and you like discoveries. And how do you feel about doing this job as opposed to this lifelong job you've had of just, doing math and, being creative and writing papers and making discoveries? It feels like you're having to put that on the back burner now, or can you keep doing the math at the same time?
Well, you asked lots of questions there in one question.
Well, it might be my last question, so I thought I'd get a lot in. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. So I think change in life is good. I know somebody who once told me, I reinvent myself every 7 years. So I haven't done it as often, but I think change is good. It invigorates you. I am lucky that I have built a structure in terms of collaborators that allows me to continue to do math, even if I have way less time. So that part is important. And I have a number of junior collaborators who I work with. So there were two things about the job here. Managing is one, leading is another, and they're different jobs. And I approached research with curiosity, and I approached these two jobs with curiosity. And so management is interesting to meet people, to listen to people, and to learn from them. So I bring the same curiosity that I brought to math research to this job. And I look forward at my professional life. And I think I had been contributing through my theorems and through my mentoring of students and postdocs. And I see this opportunity as a unique opportunity to contribute in a larger way. And so it's good to change.
Well, that's all for today. Our thanks to Professor Toro. There are more links and information in the notes for this episode, including information about SL Math. I'm Brady Harron. You've been listening to the Numberphile podcast, and we have more episodes coming soon, so please subscribe, follow, and keep an ear out for us.